In the beginning, there was nothing. No up or down. No near or far. No yesterday or tomorrow. Only God. Here, now.
Then came the idea. The idea came from God and was part of God, yet it seemed to have a life of its own.
From that idea, all things came to be. Light and darkness, time and space, energy and matter. Everything needed to make a universe.
God gathered it all together and set to work. Out of swirling gas clouds, fiery stars ignited with a whoosh. Planets and moons spun together, and galaxies danced like snowflakes on a winter night. God was in and through it all, and it was all good.
The idea kept growing. On the edge of one galaxy, a sun. Whirling around the sun, a planet. Small, lifeless, covered in dark waters. Then the breath of God came like a breeze and ruffled the surface.
Something wonderful happened. Deep in the seas, there was life, simple at first, but then more complex. New forms of life came. They filled the seas. They walked on the land. They flew in the air. Flowers bloomed and insects buzzed. The little world teemed with life and color, scent and sound.
Then God made another kind creature. This one was a bit different from the others. It could love, laugh, delight in beauty. Think, imagine, wonder, choose, maybe even have ideas of its own.
It was a risk. What would these creatures do? What would they become? Which way would they choose? Would they fall in love with the world? Would they learn to see God in it and in each other? Or not?
The idea kept moving. It fluttered around the world, creating, inspiring, enlightening, awakening. It was in every place and time. But in one place and in one time, it came to rest. Not in a great city like Rome or Jerusalem, but in a tiny village called Nazareth.
Greetings, Mary. Don't be afraid. God is with you. You are going to have a baby. You will name him Jesus, and he will have very special work to do.
Mary could hardly think straight. A baby? How? When? Why me? What will the neighbors think? What will Joseph say? But all she could blurt out was,
"How can this be? I'm not even married yet."
The God who breathes life into all things will breathe this new life into you.
Although Mary was still afraid, and although she could not yet see how, she chose to trust that God was at work, doing something special through her and through this child who was coming.
Meanwhile, Joseph was anxious and upset. He did not know what to do. He wanted to trust Mary, but her story was so far-fetched. A mysterious visitor, a baby before the wedding. Imagine the gossip. But what if he refused to marry her? What would happen to Mary then? One night, after tossing and turning for hours, he dreamed that a messenger from God came to him.
Joseph, don't be afraid. You can trust Mary. It is God who has breathed this new life into her. She will have a son, and you will call him Jesus, which means one who saves.
After that, Joseph slept soundly.
When Joseph got up in the morning and told Mary about the dream, she was so happy she cried. But another piece of news brought tears of a different sort. The emperor of Rome wanted to count the people in his empire so he would know how much money he could collect in taxes. Mary and Joseph were both worried. The baby would come soon, but there was nothing they could do. They had to go.
Late one night, After a long journey on foot and by donkey, Mary and Joseph reached Bethlehem. Now, Bethlehem means house of bread, but they had neither. Hungry and tired, they searched for a place to stay, but found only a cave where animals were kept.
Mary was scared. This was not what she had expected. She had imagined that her baby would be born at home, with family around, but home was far away.
Joseph was scared too. He had no idea how to help Mary. When some women showed up with a lamp and water and clean cloths, they had heard that there was a baby on the way. Joseph nearly cried with relief.
After many hours, the baby was born. Mary cuddled him and rested while the women made the cave clean and cozy.
Then shepherds came, breathless from running, words tumbling out of their mouths.
Goodness! The skies alight with angels.
But what had they seen? A newborn baby? An infant king? A savior? A light in the darkness? God's great idea in the flesh?
Outside, the night was dark and cold, and the world was full of troubles. But inside the cave, there was warmth and light and love. Mary nursed her baby and breathed in the smell of him. All the memories she kept in her heart, tucked away like treasures in a box to look at and wonder about later. For now, she simply wanted to be with Jesus. Whatever wonders had taken place that night, for Mary, the miracle of this tiny life was the best of all.
Life goes on. Mary and Joseph had to leave the warmth and safety of the cave and go out into the world. As custom demanded, they brought Jesus to the temple in Jerusalem because they wanted to say thank you to God for the gift of their child. To their surprise, someone was waiting for them.
Simeon and Anna had been waiting for a long time, watching eagerly for the one God had promised to send.
When Simeon saw Mary and Joseph with Jesus, somehow he knew, and his heart fluttered. He came close and held out his arms for the child.
Now I can die in peace. God, you have kept your promise. With my own eyes I have seen your salvation, your light which will shine on all people.
Mary did not understand, but the words sounded beautiful. But then Simeon added,
Some will not welcome this child. When he grows up, many will speak against him. This will break your heart.
Mary shivered. A shadow had fallen over her. How could anyone not love her beautiful child? Anna rushed over then, and her beaming face was like the sun, driving away the clouds.
What did Anna say to Mary? Who knows? Maybe she urged her not to worry about the future, but to enjoy the present moment. Maybe she told her that life is a messy mixture of joy and sadness, beginnings and endings, but God is there through all of it.
God is in all things, for those who know how to look.
Simeon and Anna caught a glimpse of who Jesus was and what he would do. But there was more. There is always more.
Far from Jerusalem, high in the eastern mountains of Persia, strangers were watching the skies. One night, they saw a new star. At least it looked like a star, but it did not act like one. Instead of staying in one place, it went its own way, wandering like a planet. It was not on any of their star charts.
What is it?
What does it mean?
A star like that must tell of something important, like the birth of some great person.
They decided to follow it.
The Magi followed that star all the way to Jerusalem. At home, they were used to dealing with kings and important people, So they went first to the palace of King Herod. They told Herod about the star they had seen and asked if he knew anything about the birth of a new king. Herod's eyes narrowed.
A new king, you say?
Fear took hold of him, fear of losing power.
Go and find this king, and when you do, be sure to come back and tell me so I can go and worship him.
But the Magi were wise enough not to trust Herod. The star led them to Bethlehem.
When they found Jesus, they were overjoyed. They gave him the gifts they had brought with them.
Gold, because it does not tarnish, and a true king values things that last.
Frankincense for prayer, because a true king seeks wisdom through being still and listening for God.
Myrrh, because it is used for healing and to anoint those who have died. A true king seeks to heal rather than harm, and a true king knows that death must come before new life.
After they had given their gifts, the Magi went home by a different way. When they did not return, Herod flew into a rage. No one could calm him. All he wanted was to find and destroy Jesus. As selfish leaders always have, he caused great harm to innocent people. But in the end, he died alone and afraid, unable to see God in Jesus or in anyone else.
On their way home, the Magi talked about the star, how it caught them by surprise, roaming freely around the world, how it scattered its gift of light far and wide, how it broke open a story about one people and made it a story for all people, maybe even for all creatures and the earth itself.
And so we return to the beginning. The idea that came from God, was part of God, yet had a life of its own. Over the years, this idea took many shapes. It became a universe, a world, creatures infinite and wonderful, people in all their variety, a child called Jesus.
This child grew up and showed us how to look for God in all things, in the birds of the air, in seeds and plants, in yeast and trees, in one another, our neighbors, our enemies, ourselves, in whatever calls forth awe, respect, reverence, wonder.
The Christ child is a sign for us, a sign that God is with us, poured out in space and time, in leaf and stone, in soil and air and water, in flesh and blood.
The Christ child invites us to see God embodied, not just in one place and one time, but in all places and all times.
In the earth, in its creatures, in its people.
And in seeing, to fall in love with the world, to open our hearts to it, to cherish and protect it.
Simeon was right. Some did not welcome Jesus. Many spoke against him. And Mary's heart was broken. It still happens. There are still fearful Herods who seek to destroy the Christ child. There are still those with power who will do anything to keep from losing it. But the idea is still here, fluttering around the world, creating, inspiring, enlightening, awakening.
As long as there are people who can imagine and dream and act, there is hope that a new world may come to be.
So come, share your light, bring your stars, become who you are meant to be, beloved child of God, part of the wonderful unfurling of God's great idea.